Caledonian Elixir. From Glasgow, Scotland, welcome to the Caledonian Elixir. I'm Vincent Lawlor, and we are live on YouTube, X, Facebook, and we also upload to Spotify and Rumble. And don't forget to hit the like, subscribe wherever you find us. It helps us be discovered in that social media labyrinth that is YouTube and Rumble. So welcome back, people. However, if you're finding us for the first time, we're a podcast that covers everything from the paranormal to politics, always told with wit and true grit. Now, if I seem a bit slow or stumbling today, it's because I knocked out a tooth about 5 hours ago, and it's still really painful. So I think I'm going to be taking a back seat to my guests and letting them do more of the talking. However, we're going to do something different today, and we've got an excellent show ahead. We're going to be doing a debate discussion show, and I seem to be taking time out of my schedule every month, as opposed to my traditional weekly one-on-one interviews, to be doing these. However, we've got several guests on tonight, minus one that we did have booked, and I'm hoping he may still join us. That is Garland Nixon, but there's been an issue with him coming on. However, we still do have Benjamin Balderson and Constantin von Hoffmeister with us today, and we are going to be discussing the most polarizing politician of our time, the master of the theatrical, President Trump, and we'll also delve into his policies and actions that are having effects on everything from economic growth, border control. So is Trump a vehicle for global war, chaotic governance, and an emerging totalitarianism of big tech? Well, to discuss this and more is my panel. First joining us from Germany is Constantin von Hoffmeister. He is the founder of Multipolar Press.
Well, thank you very much for having me. I appreciate it.
Hi, Constantin. And next, also joining us from California, USA, is Benjamin Balderson. He is an off-the-grid constitutionalist who likes to speak out against government overreach. Hi, Benjamin.
How's it going, Vincent?
Hi, how you doing, people? So I want to start us off by asking each of you a question, and we'll just open this up to an informal debate. And I want to start off with immigration, as it was a centerpiece of President Trump's re-election and also presidency. And according to the White House, I think net migration is down, and we have something like the ICE officers doubled with 600,000 deported. However, we've also seen the shooting and killing of Rene Good and was it Alex Pretty?
Mm-hmm.
So I'll start with you, Benjamin, since you're in the thick of it. Is the Trump administration's immigration policy a success or a mess?
So from my point of view, and I believe the numbers still stand, he's actually deported less people than previous presidents before him. He's actually, for as much of a mess as they've made of it, the actual work done has been less. I can definitely believe that there's less people coming across currently, but he's also deported less. And then at some point in time, he went in there and he spoke to some of the larger businesses, some of the big financiers, and they said, hey, we hire all these immigrants, that illegal immigrants, and we can't run our business without them. And Trump's like, oh, well, they can stay then. That's okay. That's okay. So when we really look at the end result of what he's done, is he's put more federal troops into the states and moved the power needle from the state government to the federal government. What we saw in Minneapolis was federal policing inside the state, inside of a state where it's not supposed to happen. And I believe that making that a the normative is what the whole goal of this was. It wasn't even anything really about the immigrants, that they were an excuse in order to bring in more federal power into the states and take away state power.
Mm. Constantin, we both reside in Europe, which has seen a massive influx of migrants in the last 10 years. So does that give you a different perspective compared to Benjamin, or do you agree that it's like a power grab?
Well, I generally agree with what he said. I don't think Trump is serious about mass deportations, because when Trump was campaigning for the presidency, I mean, you had these mass rallies and you had the Trump supporters with the signs, mass deportations now. And then Trump kept promising, as soon as I'm in power, I will initiate the largest mass deportation operation in American history. And of course, we all know that none of this happened. I mean, you have the ICE agents like arresting, I guess, illegals in like cities in California and Texas. They drag him out of the kitchen, in front of the TV cameras, and I guess it's Trump supporters. They think, yeah, he's really doing something, when in reality, he's not really doing a whole lot, because apparently there are over 20 million illegals in the United States, and he's barely deported a fraction of them. And that also leads me to the next point, because I mean, he deports them. So I guess he sends them back to Mexico across the border, but then they can just probably walk up a couple of miles and then just walk right back into the United States, because there's no real protection. It's not like you have a continuous border fence from like one end of the country to the other, which is really what you would need if you really wanted to stop illegal immigration. But I think the most effective way to stop illegal immigration would be to get rid of the incentives, because why do the illegals even come to the United States? Because they get a lot of benefits, I suppose. And they're allowed to send their kids to school. They're allowed to get driver's licenses. They're allowed to use the medical facilities. Like, why is it even possible? It's very odd, right? Like how can an illegal, a person who's not even supposed to be in the country, he's basically breaking the law just by being present in the United States. How can such a person send his or her kids to a school, like to a public school? How is it even possible? It's just really unfathomable to me. And also, the businesses that hire the illegals, they are not really punished by the Trump administration, because that would be the most efficient and the quickest way to stop the illegals from coming if they can't get hired, if they can't make any money. But he's obviously not punishing them, because like any Western government, like the governments in Western Europe, nobody is really serious about stopping mass immigration, whether legal or illegal. Because in Western Europe, we have the same phenomenon. Like in Germany, where I'm from right now, you had Friedrich Merz, he's the current chancellor. And well, he won the last election based on a bunch of promises that he didn't keep. Because he also said, like, he's gonna, crack down on immigration. He's gonna close on day one. He would close all the borders, to make sure that only those who are supposed to enter would be able to enter. But of course, he didn't do any of this. And the endless flow of immigrants, legal and illegal, is just continuing apace. And I would say that in Western Europe, the problem is not so much illegal immigration. I think it is legal immigration. Yes. Because you have the so-called refugees. I mean, people that come into the country, they throw away their passports before they enter the European country, and then they can't be deported because we don't even know like where to deport them to. And then they go through the whole, I guess, like claiming asylum, and it's a whole process that takes, I guess, years. And in that time period, they are not even allowed to work. And even if they are allowed to work, they would work for something like minimum wage, like in Germany. But at the same time, the German government gives these immigrants or refugees sort of like an allowance, right? Like if they don't work, they get like, I don't know, free housing, they get a certain, I know, sum of money every month that they can spend. And I've actually talked to some people here in the small town where I live in Germany. Like you have a lot of Ukrainian refugees as well. And I talked to like this Ukrainian man, and he pretty much told me, like, he told me, I get job offers all the time, but why should I take these job offers? Because the money they pay me for working, I don't know, like in a factory for like 8 hours a day is only a fraction more of the free money I get for not working, like unemployment benefits, so like a couple of €100 more. Like, why would he get up at like 6 a.m, slave away for 8 hours for like just like a few pennies more? And if he doesn't do it, if he doesn't work, he gets unemployment benefits, and he can do whatever he wants. He can do like take a job on the side, like
under the table,
black market jobs, so to speak. I suppose it's the same in the United States and Western Europe, because who really benefits from illegal immigration? Well, it's certainly not the native population, right? Because the native population, they have to suffer from the consequences of illegal immigration, which is a breakdown of the healthcare system, for example. Because in Germany, you have like free healthcare. So, I mean, not 100%, but the system itself, in my opinion, is quite good, the healthcare system. But of course, it's all falling apart because you have these people by the millions coming in. None of them have ever paid into the system, but they're now using the system by getting really, really expensive surgeries, dental care for like thousands and thousands of euros every month. So how, I mean, it's not even feasible in the long run that this system will survive. So the native population is already suffering because all the insurance companies, they're raising the rates because they can't afford it anymore, obviously, and the government is trying to cut costs wherever they can. They're talking about raising the pension age and.
But when you sorry for interrupting,
stuff,
but
right?
when you think about that number, 600,000 being deported in the United States, and then you've mentioned the other number, 20 million migrants into the United States. That 600,000 is a drop in the bucket. Is that a real success when you factor in the 20 million that is already still present and not deported?
And honestly, the 600,000 doesn't cover what's coming in. We still haven't hit a net negative. We're actually less immigrants than there was previously. We're at best stemming the flow. And I think Constantin hit the nail on the head that Trump openly met with businesses that make their living off of paying low wages to immigrant people. That is their business model. And rather than penalizing that business model, which is what you would do if you truly wanted to stop this, he said, oh, well, never mind then. We won't deport your guys. All right, so I don't understand how this doesn't strike the MAGA crowd, that they don't go, hold on. I didn't say that some of the illegals could stay if they're working for the right person. I said I wanted all illegals gone. And that's two very different positions.
Yeah.
Over here. So I was going to say over here in the UK, there's a lot of pressure on housing and healthcare, as you alluded to in Germany, Constantin. The social services in general are facing a lot of pressure due to migration. But I don't blame the migrants. I just wish the US and the UK would stop attacking countries that are the primary driver of the migrants coming over. When you think about Libya, Syria, Iraq, Afghan, all being attacked, and the primary nations that these migrants are coming from into the UK, into Germany, into Europe, are these countries. And I see and I hear Trump ad nauseum going on about how Europe isn't tightening the border controls and not stemming this flow of migrants. Well, it's kind of like, stop fucking blowing up the world, man.
I totally agree with you. And just to go back real quick to what was alluded to earlier, so like Trump meeting these businessmen that live off migrants, basically. I think it's this same phenomenon all over the West, because big business, they only profit from immigrants, whether legal or illegal, because they drive down wages. The businesses, they don't have to suffer the costs and the consequences of this mass immigration. The taxpayers do, right? So if they're unemployed, if they don't have a job, they get money from the government, which is basically money from the people. It's tax money, obviously. It's not the big businesses that pay unemployed immigrants to buy food and housing. So the businesses, they only profit because they can pick and choose the immigrants that they want to work on the fields or in the factories or in the kitchens, basically. That's how it works. And just real quick, I would like to hear your opinion on the United States, because, I mean, you mentioned that in the United States, okay, so we have 20 million illegal immigrants, 600,000 were kicked out. Well, it is a drop in the bucket, in my opinion. And also, you have the sort of bipolar problem in the United States, because you have a bipolar system, political system, I mean, and I mean this in a clinical sense, because you have, for example, like a president like Biden, right, who basically opens all borders. Everybody can just walk in, you know, it doesn't matter, they can stay, they get everything. Then you have a person like Trump coming into power, who at least is, I suppose, is sort of trying to stem the tide somewhat. And even if such a person was successful, a person like Trump, after 4 years, you might have another Democrat. He will just open the doors again, and they will all come right back in. So there's no real stability or continuity in the system. I mean, what do you think about this?
I couldn't agree more. The best analogy I could think of is, at best, Trump is the guy who's bailing the water out of the boat while water still flows in twice as fast as what he's bailing. And Biden, he didn't even bail. He's just like, oh yeah, nice. And 100% agree that everything, and especially with the focus that's been put on executive orders, where you're seeing the executive branch take up way more power than that branch was ever supposed to hold, where you're seeing they're bypassing the Senate, bypassing the House, they're bypassing every single thing and just writing laws. And that's absolutely insane. And to expect that the next president that comes in is going to start giving up those powers, that's never happened. That's not historically happened. They just take up that power mantle and run with it and add to it. And so this is again why, from my perspective, we haven't seen a severe decrease in immigrants. What we have seen is a severe increase in federal overreach, where the federal government now thinks that it can control things inside the states. And that's a bad precedence to set. Before the Trump administration, we saw the Biden administration using the letter agencies to go after their political rivals. The people that would go to school meetings were being labeled as terrorists because they didn't want their kids getting some of the information that the leftists were pushing, things like that. So Biden was prosecuting those people. Do you think, does anybody think that after Trump has literally unleashed a task force? Well, it already existed, but empowered to such a degree that it's absolutely ridiculous. Do you think the Biden or whoever Democrat administration that comes in next, because the Republicans have zero chance right now?
Wasn't there something during the Biden presidency where the Democrats or certain agencies were going after Catholics for opposing maybe transgenderism being taught in school?
Yeah, they were calling it,
they
put everybody on the terrorist watch list. If you went to a school board meeting and said, I don't want these kids reading these books about being transgender or about having homosexual activities, I don't want that. I don't want my kids reading about sexual activities in school, period.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
They were labeled a terrorist.
That happens a lot over in the UK, but it's usually Muslims who oppose the teaching of sexuality or the LGBTQ thing to their kids. You hear a lot about that. Right, I want to transition us away from the immigration, because I want to focus this more on big tech and its relationship to President Trump. However, before I do it, I just want to play a quick clip that I think's germane to what we're about to talk about.
And I don't think it gets much more hostile than Iran. They're capable fighters. They're very tough people. And there are others like that. You don't mind when the enemy is weak, but that enemy is strong.
Right, that's not really germane to what we're talking about. I just thought it was funny. President Trump talking aside. Easter. This week we saw President Trump, and I think this actually is germane, even though it was a Truth Social. He put out a Truth Social stating that it should be mandatory for a list of nations to be signatories to the Abraham Accords, and I think those nations were Turkey, Qatar, Bahrain, UAE, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, with even Kazakhstan and Iran joining at some point. And as we know, the Abraham Accords are more than the normalization of relations with Israel. There's also a formalization of trade and investment there. And I think that's very, very interesting, right? So, in a climate of regional conflict and tenuous ceasefires, do you think there's any chance that this has any possibility of being realized, Constantin?
No, well, I do not, because the United States obviously cannot be trusted by anybody in the Middle East or pretty much any other country in the world, because they keep breaking agreements, breaking treaties treacherously, attacking nations even during negotiations. I'm even surprised that Iran is even continuing to negotiate, supposedly, with the United States, because we're not even sure if that's true, because
Iran denied it every time except for this
Right.
most recent time.
Yeah. Well, because Trump keeps making shit up, right? Like he pretty much has been saying like every week now for the last 2 months that he's like close to reaching a deal with Iran, and I think it's just market manipulation, obviously.
Yeah, insider trading involved there as well.
Right. Yeah. So and Iran has already stated, like with the Abraham Accords, that they would never, ever normalize relations with Israel because they consider the Israel as a completely illegitimate entity that shouldn't exist, right? I mean, this is Iran's view, and I don't think they will ever change it. And I think they even said that they would rather be martyred as a whole nation than ever normalize relations or even recognize Israel as a legitimate state. So yeah, so I mean, because Trump's idea is to get Iran on board as well, I don't think it's ever going to happen, right? And I think the Trump administration has backed itself into a corner with this completely pointless and unprovoked attack on Iran, because I mean, it's how I see it. Trump basically, he can't get out, right? Because he can't really attack Iran, because he keeps saying, like, if they don't do what I want him to do, then I'll just bomb the shit out of them, right? But even that will not get him out, because I mean, he can bomb Iran again. He might bomb Iran again, but it will make everything even worse for the United States and for the world at large, because then Iran will retaliate and they will hit a bunch of very important facilities in the Middle East, which will make the current crisis 10 times worse. And I think the United States is very well aware of this, and this is why we haven't seen any real renewed attack by the United States and Israel on Iran in the last couple of weeks.
Benjamin, there's also alluded to it there, that investment dimension to this, isn't there? Where you see the Gulf countries investing like their sovereign wealth funds into big tech and AI.
AI is definitely one of the big goals to set up this global digital network that's going to be an imprisonment for all the rest of us. The amount that Trump has jumped in with Peter Thiel and with the other companies like that, 100% he's down with whatever the technocrats want. And the technocrats don't want us to have any type of freedom in the United States. This is why there's data centers growing like flies in a dung heap. They're just popping up everywhere, because they need, and they're right now. It's interesting. I'm seeing a lot of people blame like podcasts and things like that on these data centers. Like, that's not what these are for. These are for the overwhelming amount of information that the government is taking in illegally because they can't take it. So they authorize these private corporations to do it. And then, of course, these private corporations then give the government the information that they want so they can backdoor it without a warrant. One of the examples that a guy can use real easily is these flock cameras, which are absolutely recording in any major city in the United States. It records every movement you make. And you're starting to see a series of civil lawsuits.
Sorry, what did you call them? Flock cameras?
Flock cameras.
What are they exactly?
It's literally just a camera that's attached to a data center, and they're just recording everything. And every single person that drives by that camera, every single person that walks by it. So you're seeing a series of lawsuits that are starting to come out now, where these police are they're going in and accessing this information without a warrant and using it in order to obtain arrests. So recently there was a lady that her house got, I don't know if you guys know what a porch pirate is, where like Amazon or somebody drops a package off on your porch and then somebody comes up and steals it. And well, this happened to somebody. The local police went to the flock camera company, went to the data center and got downloads of all this information. Well, they found a lady that had driven by this residence every day. And so they put out a warrant for arrest and took her to court. Well, the lady absolutely didn't do it. It turns out that there was a Ring doorbell and it didn't match her whatsoever, and that she worked. That was just the route to her work. But they're accessing these things and then putting that data together without warrants, without anything, and then using that information against us already on the very small tip of it. There was a guy that lived in Texas. He worked for the oil companies, and he was a salesman. So every day he drove to this other city, would stay, have sales meetings, and then drive back. The police set up a scenario to get him pulled over, and then searched his entire vehicle and decided that this guy was obviously trafficking drugs because he was going to this other city, staying for a couple hours, and then returning back. So this was obviously drug activity. It turns out that the guy is just a oil field equipment salesman and was just in his normal duties of his job. And yet this guy got harassed, pulled over. They set up a sting operation. They arrested him, the whole nine. So you're starting to see a series of these civil rights violations that they're already showing that the technology is being used against us. These recordings of every single movement we make is already being used against us, and they're using it to bypass the normal court system.
So I just got an email from Garland there, and he was saying his car broke down. And that's the reason why he didn't make it.
What did you say happened to Garland?
I just received an email there from him. He was saying that his car broke down on the road, and that's the reason he was unable to make it. So, at least he got back to us, and I don't know if I should respond and ask him, does he think he'll be able to make it some point within the hour? But in response to what you were saying there, Benjamin, I recently had Ilana Freeland on, and she was talking about transhumanism and the growing role of technology in our culture and how it's expanding and, a threat to our civil liberties. And I've got, I think it's Mike Grady, or is it John Beltran? I think he was on the Alex Jones show from Mind Nexus. He does a lot of work on this transhumanism and creating technologies to raise awareness and protect us. So this is something that really does concern me. And I recently saw an interview with Tucker Carlson, and O'Leary and they were talking about the data centers that are being built. I think there's a huge one being built in Utah. Is it Utah? It's like 600 acres or some shit like that. It's absolutely massive. Anyway, I'd like to play this clip.
That's where the original large data center was also built, was in Lehigh, Utah, the one that Homeland Security owns, and that is just a giant hundreds and hundreds of acres data
Yeah.
center, and that's all it is.
Yeah. Here's a clip of Tucker discussing this.
We are so close to the scariest, most dystopian system. This is what the drive to build all these thousands of data centers is about, to micromanage the world's population through the new financial world order. AI is really about that. We're heading towards digital control systems where we have no more control over our liquid assets. It will be programmable, permission-based, so only what the central planners allow you to use your money.
That's Tucker discussing, the growing role of AI in data centers, the looming threat of AI. Now I read somewhere like by 2030, the amount of power consumption that these data centers will take up in the US will be between 14 and 20%. That's fucking crazy, man. 20% of power. Yeah, I don't think it's a coincidence.
Power that we don't have. That we don't have. The infrastructure is not built for this.
And I don't think it's a coincidence that all of these countries that President Trump and the US military seems to be going after are all of these countries that have huge amounts of energy. What do you think about that, Constantin?
Well, I find it quite ironic because when Trump went to China a couple of weeks ago on a state visit, CNN, or I forget if it was CNN or some other channel, but one of the mainstream channels did like a short bit standing in like a major Chinese city and pointing out all the cameras on the street and sort of like criticizing the Chinese government for, spying on its citizens in public spaces. I thought that was very funny because, as you pointed out, and as Benjamin pointed out, the United States is doing exactly the same thing, possibly even on a larger scale than China is. It's like the pot calling the kettle black, but we all know like the hypocrisy of regular politicians, especially the United States, when it accuses countries of doing things that it does itself. Like when it says, for example, that Iran is illegally closing the Strait of Hormuz and it goes against international law, right? I mean, it's just absurd. It's considering that the United States and Israel launched a completely unprovoked attack on a sovereign country, and the United States just shortly before just kidnapped the president of another sovereign country, right? Like, I personally don't believe in this whole concept of international law. I think it's a fiction. It has never existed. It was sort of propped up by Western powers to sort of legitimize their neo-colonialist ambitions. And it was always used together with this farce called human rights. Yes, like we need to basically invade or sort of colonize or conquer other countries to impose our value system, whether these countries want it or not. It's sort of like Rudyard Kipling in the guy who wrote the Jungle Book, right? I mean, he's famous for the poem that he wrote called White Man's Burden, when I
really love the poem If. I think it's
right.
Is it If? That's a great one.
Right, was another good one. But White Man's Burden, basically, it was written during the heyday of, I suppose, British imperialism, when the Brits were supposed to go to the far corners of the world, let's say the Africa and Asia, and sort of lift up the savages in their eyes. And today we have the liberal regimes in power, establishments in pretty much all the Western countries, maybe not so much anymore in the United States, even though they still have a solid grip, of course, because it's the same kind of mentality, even though they now claim to be anti-racist and everybody's equal and so on. They're still acting like the white supremacists of the 19th century, basically, because they're arguing that our values, meaning Western values, are the only ones that matter, and they're universal, and everybody is sort of obliged to follow them, which is, of course, goes against the whole concept of real diversity, where you have an array of different cultures and traditions that see things differently. Like, I don't know, it's like the Taliban, for example, in Afghanistan, right? I mean, I've read pretty reliable reports that a majority of the Afghan population is pretty much behind the Taliban. They support the Taliban. But of course, the West thinks that, or thought for like 20 years until they lost the war. And that, I mean, the United States started the war in Afghanistan to oust the Taliban, spent over $1 trillion. I mean, not even billions of dollars, but literally trillions of dollars occupying Afghanistan for over 20 years. And then they left with the Taliban in power. So what's the point of all this, right?
And it's also ironic that Karzai's brother was also the biggest opium trafficker in the country. And we were there, allegedly.
Right, exactly. I mean, they always say it's about, like, I don't know, women's rights. We need to give the women back their dignity in Afghanistan. We need to help the gay people in Iran. You know, even though nobody really cares, and who are we to judge how these people view morality in other countries with their different traditions? I think it's pretty presumptuous in the first place.
You know, I just had a thought. And it goes back to our interventions, well, not our interventions, but the interventions of our governments, and tying it to the Abraham Accords. Could it be that the Abraham Accords are a vehicle to establish commerce that maintains American economic dominance beyond the petrodollar? You know, you see the rise of new blocs such as BRICS. Do you think, Constantin, that Trump and the elites around him are trying to establish new blocs that operate beyond the petrodollar? And this is why you've got the Abraham Accords, for example, because the AI and the investment into AI is very tied into that.
No, yeah, I think you're onto something, because the petrodollar is clearly disappearing. I mean, the power of the petrodollar, but it's all self-inflicted because of the conflict in Iran. The U.S. presence in the Middle East will be, I mean, it will be severely diminished, if not disappear altogether, because this is one of the conditions that Iran demands from the United States. They pretty much want them out of the region. And I think Israel, by sort of pulling the United States into this conflict, has severely miscalculated, because I think Israel wanted to sort of assert its dominance in the Middle East by getting rid of its biggest rival, which is Iran. And of course, they used the United States to achieve this aim, but I think obviously they failed, right? They thought they could do like a decapitation strike, like kill the Iranian leadership, and then everything would collapse. Of course, it hasn't happened. And now I think the Iranian government has more backing from its own populace than before the conflict, because I think a lot of the protesters, or the Iranian protesters that were against the government, are now firmly behind the government, especially after the attack on the school, where, I mean, almost 200 schoolgirls were murdered by the United States by a Tomahawk missile, and which, by the way, the United States government to this day has not even admitted, and they haven't apologized for it, which in my opinion is despicable.
Constantin, didn't we see something similar in Russia with a Ukrainian drone strike that hit a Russian school, killing 20 girls in a dormitory?
Yeah,
and the Russians responded with that massive, attack on Kyiv.
Well, yeah, but it happened a few days ago, right? I mean, there was another war crime of massive proportions. Not as big as what the United States did to the school in Iran, but yeah, I mean, obviously targeting civilians, and especially children, is reprehensible in any shape or form. I mean, there's really no other way to put it. And I think the United States made a a strategic blunder in not admitting it, at least, because the whole world knows that the United States did it. I mean, it's pretty obvious. And the fact that they won't admit it, and the fact that they won't apologize for it, I think is really, really bad for its image, especially in the global South, because people can see now that the United States is an aggressor and it cannot be trusted, even in good faith. And you cannot negotiate with the United States in good faith. And that just real quick brings me back to what I mentioned earlier. I think Sergei Lavrov, the foreign minister of the Russian Federation, he said this a while back. He said that the United States is agreement incapable. And this is because of the bipolar political system that I mentioned earlier, because one president might make an agreement with a country like Obama did with Iran, but then the next president will just rip it up. And they're null and void, like Trump did with the agreement that Obama did with Iran. So why would any country like sign any agreement with the United States? Because they know it's only good for like 3-4 years, because the next administration will just ignore it. It's like when Trump talks about the conflict in Ukraine, he says things like, it's Biden's war, I had nothing to do with it. It's like, but it's not Biden's war or Trump's war. It is an American war that is being waged in Europe, you know.
Yeah. And Balderson, we were on a panel debate with Jim Jatras, and there was a disagreement with Alan Paul, where he
between me and Jim. Me and Jim were on the same side.
Not between you and Jim. You were just on the panel. We agreed with Jim, but Alan Paul thought this was not Trump's war. You know, he was actually trying to resolve it, and no, this is something that the bureaucracy, that the deep state and the military-industrial complex of America are invested in, regardless of whether Trump is or not.
I think what Constantin was missing in what he had just said, which I agree with all of it, but what he didn't add into the equation is the extraordinary unpopularity of this with the American people. One of Trump's planks in his reelection was no new wars. And the American populace historically has not wanted to go to war with anybody. This is something that, you know, even World War I, World War II, there is not, that I can think of, a war that the United States has been particularly cool with, the populace in and of itself. And so while they're making an ass out of itself to the global community by not admitting it, if they do admit it, that is going to be a crushing blow to the small percentage that is accepting this war in the United States population, and that is trying to excuse it. It's a tiny percentage. That Trump, I believe, right now has worse numbers than any president in history. The Republican Party is looking at getting absolutely destroyed in this midterms, because people are so very unhappy with, we don't want to go to the damn war. Your average American citizen doesn't give two rats ass about Israel or Iran. They're not even sure where to point to those on a map. They don't care about them. They do know that the prices of all their food, all their gas, everything else has risen so much more than what the TV pretends like it's risen. Just a handful of years ago, we were at $2 gas here in California. Now $6.75 down at the pump today when I was there this morning. That you can't, that's triple the price. You can't deal with that as an economy when we haven't started making more money as a people. And so if he starts admitting that they're also doing heinous shit and knowing that they're doing it, you lose what tiny bit of public support you have for this whole investment.
Demoralization. Yeah. You know what? I've got another clip that of someone who is not speaking about the war, but is asking us to disarm something.
Artificial intelligence needs to be disarmed. The word is strong, I know, but deliberately chosen because this moment needs words capable of attracting attention, awakening consciences, and indicating paths forward for humanity. The Church has long been working for nuclear disarmament, aware that every great technical power can affect people's lives, and so must be accompanied by adequate moral discernment and public control. Nuclear disarmament remains a service to peace and the dignity of the human family. In a similar sense, artificial intelligence now demands to be disarmed, freed from logics that turn it into an instrument of domination.
Those are strong words from a pontiff. It kind of gives more credibility, I think, anyway, to the threat or the notion that AI is a threat. And what do you think about that, Benjamin? Because I know you're off the grid and you're someone that's skeptical of the grown role of technology.
I agree. I'm not sure how we could accomplish what he is stating, where we could somehow make AI powerless. Like, people don't realize right now how many things in the world AI is absolutely running, that they're already becoming almost solely dependent on AI, its projections. They showed from the war room, AI's picking our targets, doing all kinds of things. And it's all the way down to, there's civil lawsuits. Like there was one in Reno recently where a guy got ejected or arrested, ejected, beat up at a casino because AI said that he was this problem. Well, it turns out that it wasn't even him. And the guy actually showed his, what they call now, because in order to get around that immigrant thing that we were talking about earlier with the IDs, they implemented this thing called a real ID, which is supposed to really be a real ID to bypass. It says right here, this is my California driver's license. It says on the license in the back, this card is not acceptable for official federal purposes. This license is issued only as a license to drive a motor vehicle. It does not establish eligibility for employment, voter registration, or public benefits. Because it's not a real ID. This is how they're getting around this BS.
Mm-hmm. I've got a quote here that you might be familiar with, Balderson. You may too, Constantin, but it is not possible to make a lasting compromise between technology and freedom, because technology is by far the more powerful social force than the aspiration for freedom. What I suggest is that the human race might easily permit itself to drift into a position of such dependence on machines that it will have no practical choice other than to accept all of the machine's decisions. Now, that was written in the 1970s by none other than Ted Kaczynski. And when the Unabomber is saying... and when, I don't want to draw a parallel between the Pope and Kaczynski, but when the Pope is saying, or part of what the Pope is saying, it sort of reflects or mirrors what Kaczynski was saying 50 years previously. Maybe Kaczynski was onto something.
If you read the Unabomber manifesto, you're like, was this guy a fucking prophet?
Yeah, Industrial Society in its future. I actually read Industrial Society in its future again just a few days ago. It kind of prep for this because I was just wanting to kind of get an idea as to what he would have thought about AI and everything. You're right, he is like a prophet of a printed page. So much that he wrote 50 years ago has emerged. Constantin, are you familiar with Kaczynski?
Yeah, of course. I mean, I read his works and I agree with a lot of what he said. And I think he was sort of, extreme in his views. Nevertheless, he was right about a lot of what he said. And what the Pope said, I also agree. Mm-hmm. But I don't think it's feasible to stop the advance of technology and to stop the advance of AI unless you could only really combat sort of like the spread of AI, the spread of technology, if you had a global government, right, which would defeat the whole purpose, in my opinion, because, I mean, the European Union, for example, they could decide, unilaterally, okay, we're going to have strict controls on the development of AI, which is sort of what they are doing right now, yes. But of course, they're not going to stop China from advancing AI. They're not going to stop the United States or any other country, because they're just going to continue, because they're in competition with other countries. It's like the space race during the Cold War. I think AI now, who's going to get more powerful AI? So the United States versus China, I think they're the two biggest players, obviously, because entities like the European Union that put too much control on the development of AI will, of course, be left behind. But at the same time, once AI really takes over, they will also be affected by it. It's like, I think a good analogy would be Germany with its like climate hysteria. It's very unique to Germany, where, like, I don't know, actually my wife told me, a friend of mine told me that he knows people that like voluntarily like switch off the air conditioning in the office and rather sweat because they want to save the environment, like in German office buildings. And people are really obsessed, like a large percentage of the German population, with like saving the planet, especially with regards to the climate, whether it's true or not, right? I don't really think it's true, but they think it's true. So they don't eat fish because even though they like fish, because they believe that because of overfishing, there are not enough fish in the oceans, right? So they voluntarily abstain from eating fish. I mean, this is how far people go in Germany, which is really, really grotesque if you think about it. And it's not even logical, because when I tell these Germans, when I have conversations with them, I say, well, let's just suppose it's true what you're saying, that climate change is man-made and we could somehow stop it by changing our behavior patterns. You're not, I mean, if only, but right now it's really only Germany and a few European countries who are sort of, I mean, obsessed with this, right? So even if it were true that it's man-made, just Germans engaging in this behavior would not stop climate change anyway, because Germany is like a tiny, tiny fraction of the world's population. China's going to continue what they're doing. The United States is going to continue. India is going to continue. So what difference does it really make? It would really only work if the whole entire world would be engaged in it. And it's the same with the control of AI. So how can you possibly stop the development of AI? Because the genie is already out of the bottle. You know what I mean?
I also read somewhere that I think it's between 50 and 60% of the energy that powers these data centers are fossil fuels. So we're not going to be switching off fossil fuels if we want to.
There's no energy system that can compete.
Mm-hmm.
The amount of power that those things are sucking up and cooling, what they're doing to our water systems. There's already towns in the United States where they're saying that there's some lakes and things that they're taking and using as cooling, and it's raised the lake's temperature by degrees, which is then creating things like algae blooms, killing off different species because they can't survive in that environment now, because you have specifically changed that. And I couldn't agree more on the climate change thing. They actually, the liberal side in the United States is super onto that. And, yeah, sure, you rode a bicycle to work today. Over in Saudi Arabia, they burned a field that was 100 miles by 100 miles of tires just burning, blowing smoke up into the air. What did you do? Nothing.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's like those movie stars that advocate, for doing something about climate change while flying in their private jets all over the world nonstop, basically.
I'm torn.
It's just shaming the populace. All they're doing is shaming us.
No, yeah.
They don't live by that.
Yeah, they don't give a shit, really, obviously.
Yeah. And again, like taking it back to Kaczynski, I think he was arguing that it was technology that was the more powerful social force that was driving things. It wasn't communism, it wasn't capitalism. Capitalism isn't causing more fossil fuels to be burnt. It's technology, but it's the more dominant and powerful social force that's causing this, and we are too dependent on technology. So regardless of what these people say about global warming, it's what they do, it matters. You know?
Well, and we can already see MIT has done a study that shows what the usage of the people that use AI on a regular basis. It's showing their brain activity is just dying. Like it's not just a slight bit; their brain activity falls off a cliff because they're now just farming out. Even in the debate circuit, I do quite a few debates, and it's shocking how many of the people I debate straight up what they argue with me. I will say something that from my research and understanding, and they'll lean over and go like this, and then read to me what the fucking AI says.
Yeah, I mean, that thumbnail I created for this episode, fucking knockout, man. Really looks cool. Garland Nixon's even there. But you know, AI, it did it. You know, I couldn't do that. It'd be AI generated that in like a minute. You know, so it has got that utility behind it.
And what we learn, because I'm a little bit of a Luddite, meaning that I'm kind of an anti-technology guy. This is part of why, like, one of my actual shows I go on weekly is called Uncle Ted Talks. It's modeled after Ted Kaczynski and the thought processes that he was having. And when you take the thing that technology brings is the ability for people that don't have the ability to do the thing that the craftsman was able to do before that. So, which on the face of it sounds pretty good. We're opening up the force to how many people are able to do something because now we have a specialized fancy technology that's taking the place of learned craftsmanship. But what we lose in this is the craftsmanship. So when these people that are doing it that aren't true craftsmen are doing it, they're doing it horribly, and you don't possibly get the same results. I was watching something the last couple weeks where they're talking about one of the reasons that Viking ships had such durability is because they were splitting the wood beams with the grain. So the grain was maintaining its integrity rather than just chewing through it with a saw and shaping it with saws and sanders and whatnot. They weren't just shaping the wood. They were using the natural fibers and integrity of the wood to maintain. And so you got a much better result. The same thing with like LASIK surgery. Yes, LASIK surgery made it so anybody can do eye surgeries. It opened up to where all across the country, people were able to do those eye surgeries and take away their glasses. We also lost the savant eye surgeons who were able to do things that not even the computers and the programs could do. They could do things that were damn near superhuman. And that gets lost also because now everybody relies on the technology. Why would you? The whole thing the technology did was give it kind of an even middle ground where we don't get bad surgeries anymore. We also don't get amazing surgeries anymore. We get this acceptable level. So we've given up. It's very much anybody that's ever seen Harrison Bergeron, where it's a dystopian book by Kurt Vonnegut, where they take in, because some people can't do things like play Mozart, you would take away the Mozarts and you would also take away the horrible musicians. So everybody's just at this nice, even level. And what we've done is taken away the beauty and the amazing things in doing this.
You do need the horrible musicians so we can appreciate the good ones. I mean, I consider myself a horrible musician. I play the sanjin and the shamisen, and these are, Eastern instruments. Like Japanese folk music, that kind of stuff. But I suck at it. I know when you get someone that's been, like Kyle Abbott, who has, he lives in California and he's devoted like 30 years of his life to playing this, and he's like a savant. He's amazing at it. And I can play a lot of the menial, a lot of the songs. However, when I compare myself, and I know that's something you really shouldn't do too much, compare yourself to people who've been doing it, all their lives. I've only been playing for like 5-6 years. But yeah, you do need the ones that aren't so good, so we can appreciate the talent. And it's interesting because I was reading something that you said about the compartmentalization and the compartmentalization of medical science, about how everything there's a specificity to everything now. Whereas in the 18th century, you just saw a doctor for everything, but now you need to see a neurologist or a dentist or a heart surgeon. It's all compartmentalized now. And it's it's a bit similar to what you're saying, although you're bringing up how AI is going to replace the role of the human and the role of medical science. Constantin, you got anything to add to that?
Yeah. Well, I don't entirely agree, to be honest, with Benjamin. I mean, I agree with certain aspects of what he said, but not completely. And what you just said about compartmentalization, I think that just came with the growth of knowledge, right? I mean, because the amount of knowledge that you would need to be a doctor for everything would be pretty much impossible for a human being to possess these days. I mean, 100 years ago, like I guess medical knowledge was a lot smaller, so it was still possible to be a doctor for everything. But because it grows exponentially, like every day, basically, like that's why it's becoming more and more compartmentalized. I think it's just a natural process. And as I said earlier, I mean, AI is a genie out of the bottle. It's not going to go back into the bottles. We'll never get rid of AI. AI is here to stay, obviously. And I mean, I sympathize somewhat with the Luddite sentiments, but I think it's futile to resist, basically, because I guess it's the people that in Manchester during the Industrial Revolution, burned the textile machinery, etc. It didn't really stop progress, or what they call progress, and it's not going to stop AI either. Like when the Pope gives speeches, or when people in the EU are worried and they're sort of putting some regulations, it's not going to stop it. So I mean, because I hear this debate now all the time, like on social media, like X or Substack, where people accuse each other of using AI to write texts, basically. So it's become sort of like a purity spiral. Like people always have to prove that they didn't use AI to compose an article, for example. And I think it's becoming more and more difficult to prove. I mean, there are certain programs right now, like these AI detectors, that can sort of supposedly detect if a text was written with AI and how many % of it was written with AI and so on. But they're not really 100% reliable as far as I know. And they're not admissible in court, right? Precisely because of the false negatives and false positives. Because a lot of times, I mean, I fed my old articles that I wrote in college in the 1990s. I used to write film reviews and essays about movies into these AI detectors. And with one of them, it said it was 90% AI, right? Even though it was 0%, because AI didn't even exist back then when I wrote the article. It's just one example. And but AI is getting more and more sophisticated, like these large language models. So I think soon it will not even be possible to detect them at all, in my opinion, right? Because the development is really, really, really fast. I mean, they have this famous meme of Will Smith eating spaghetti. Maybe you've seen it on X, right? Like the development of AI video, like 3 years ago, like Will Smith eating spaghetti still looks very cartoonish, his face and everything. Then 2 years ago, a little bit more realistic, and then today it looks almost 100% realistic. Like you wouldn't know that it's not really Will Smith eating the spaghetti. I mean, this is amazing.
It makes you think about the role of Hollywood. What role
that's
Hollywood
my point. I mean, exactly. I mean, it's amazing and scary at the same time, because I see these videos now all over the place, right? Like with Tom Cruise and all these famous actors, but it's not them. It's just AI, but it looks 100% realistic. I mean, how do we know that anything is real? Like what when they show us Trump visiting or shaking the Chinese politician's hand, how do we know it's Trump? We don't really know anything anymore soon, right? Because like I said, it's growing exponentially. Development is exponential, it's getting faster and faster. And I think people will just get used to it. I don't think it's true that there will be no real artists anymore in the future. Like people will use AI to enhance their art maybe, but you will still need talent to create great art, in my opinion, because AI is sort of like a tool, right? Like a word processor or spell checker, right? Because that is or I don't know, grammar checker, like that existed before AI, like in computer programs, just more sophisticated. So I think people will just adapt and they will learn to live with AI. But I don't think it will kill human creativity or human talent completely. I think it will just channel it in new directions, evolutionarily speaking. And it's really difficult to see where this evolution will take us, but it will definitely take us somewhere.
You know, you're right about the utility of it there. At the end of every show, a song comes on, and that's me and my friend playing Pink Floyd's Money. But it's a kind of Star Trek Deep Space Nine take on it. So instead of, singing about money, we're talking about Gold Press Platinum, where we're reciting different characters in Deep Space Nine. And again, using computers and AI helped us do that. And I don't think I could have done that, 10 years ago before I started using computers, because I wasn't using computers 10 years ago, because one of the reasons I'm interested in Alana Freeland and these types of characters is I actually get ill when I'm around computers too long. I start to get tinnitus and headaches and dizzy. So I tend to only use it when I need to. So I do see the utility of it, but for folk like me who are maybe sensitive to EMF, it's kind of like, shit, man, maybe I should be out in the, with sticks like Balderson there, living in the woods. You know what? I want to transition this to something else before we wrap this up, because one thing surprised me recently, and that was the defeat of Thomas Massey to Ed Galron in Kentucky. And there's allegations, that this happened because of the money, the APAC and stuff like that. What's that about Balderson? Why did that happen? I thought he was a certainty to win. Was that because Trump was opposed to him, or was that because of his, APAC, etc.?
APAC, Trump, everything. What Thomas Massey did was the things that Trump promised in his campaigning, Massey tried to force through. Massey tried to force through the releasing the Epstein files. Massey tried to force through stopping some of these tech things. All the things that Israel and Trump want, Massey, even though Trump was promising some of these things in his campaigning, Massey's like, yeah, that sounds good. Massey was trying to hold him to it. Now that particular election, the oddities that are showing up in that are astounding. I believe they had more votes in a primary by a substantial amount than what they did during the presidential election in that county, where we're talking, I believe it was like 300% increase in the people that were voting against him. It was over 100% increase in total voters. Like that, this doesn't happen. People in the United States don't vote in primaries. And usually the midterm elections, dismal outturn on the midterm elections, dismal outturn on the primaries. For most of us, primaries don't mean anything. I mean, the Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton little battle where Bernie Sanders, they took it to court and it was admitted that the DNC is a private corporation and they aren't beholden to our votes and who they want to put up for the primary, that if they want to decide that in a smoke-filled back room, that is their right. That was stated in open court. As the Bernie Sanders people won, they're like, yep, they cheated. But the end decision of it was, but they have the right to cheat if they want, because it's a private corporation. And so most people don't have anything to do with primaries. And all of a sudden they dump, what was it total, like $40 million into this primary? Like, that's just absolute insanity, the amount of money that they just dumped into that. And even with that money dumped in, it's super hard to believe, just looking historically at the United States and looking at statistical anomalies. This anomaly is so far out of line in the way the voting happened It's absolutely ridiculous.
Constantin.
Well, I agree with him, of course, right? And I think it's a generational thing, because I just read an article about it yesterday that say the boomers still support the Zionist policies, or sort of the Zionist influence in the United States, while the younger generations, even among Republicans, like almost the majority rejects it. So I think it's just a matter of time till you have a real paradigm shift in the United States when it comes to Zionist influence on American foreign policy. Because really, I mean, this is really what drives American foreign policy, especially in the Middle East, because there's really no interest for the United States to be engaged in these conflicts in the Middle East, except to basically be Israel's support, like Israel's attack dog, so to speak. Yes, which is basically the role that the United States took upon itself when it attacked Iran. And I think after this conflict, which is clearly lost by the United States, this whole relationship between the United States and Israel will be rethought, like quite thoroughly, and it will change a lot, hopefully for the better. And I'm quite optimistic, because I think this special relationship will come to an end quite soon because of this Iran debacle.
Well, we can hope. And you referenced the demographic difference, polarity there between the boomers and the millennials, the Gen Zs. You know, I've had Nicholas Gonzalez on that panel. You were on Balderson, and we did a one-on-one, and he's a little bit younger, and I think he's in his 30s, and I had James Hake on, he's in his early 40s, and they've got quite decent shows that get a decent audience, and they work for the JLP outfit, and I'm still surprised at the number of millennials and Gen Zs that still support this stuff, and the genocide or the siege of Gaza, the occupation, isn't something that's new. It's been going on for decades. So why do you feel that there's going to be this transition in terms of foreign policy because the demographics are changing?
Well, because I think it's the majority, though. I mean, I think these are outliers still, like famous ones, because they do podcasts, they appear on shows. But I think overall, I think the outlook is shifting. Both in the Democrat camp for sure, but also in the Republican camp, because from what I read, like more than 50% of like young Republicans are really opposed to this Zionist influence over American foreign policy. And you can, I mean, this is why Massey got such massive grassroots support and became a meme on X and popularized on X, almost like Trump was popularized during his very first campaign, because people really want to see change. Because, I mean, people are sick and tired of it, from what I can see, to be honest. And it's not just in the United States, but I think it's in the West as a whole, even in Western Europe. Even though I guess in Western Europe, this sort of influence is not as strongly felt.
But you know, Balderson, you said something earlier about how Americans generally don't give a shit about what's happening in the other side of the world, but they care more about the cost of living, care more about healthcare. And we saw with Bernie Sanders years ago, how he should have been a shoo-in to be the Democrat nominee, but we screwed him essentially because of how that system's set up. And then I just think, you know, with Thomas Massey getting ejected, with Marjorie Taylor Greene getting ejected, you know, is what's going on in Gaza. You know, if I think it's been announced by Netanyahu that he's going to occupy 70% of Gaza. And we know the Greater Israel Project involves them taking what they also call Samaria, which is the West Bank. Is that going to shift anything in the United States? I don't think so. Not in the long term.
I actually agree with Constantin here on this, because when we're looking at the demographics for the heavy support for Israel, that almost exclusively comes out of the Christian right, the heavy Christian right, because there's been a great Zionist movement that made a heavy tie between God and Israel, and God can't turn its back. But as Constantine said, that's in the boomer crowd. Now, when we're looking at it, the Democrats don't feel this. The Democrat crowd, we can just excise them out, which is actually quite a bit bigger. I think they're like 5% of the registered total registered voters. It's a 5% difference between Republicans and Democrats, with Democrats winning. I think they're at like 28% and Republicans are at like 23%. Now, when we look at the movement of the to push away from the Zionism, that movement is all right-wing people. It's not left-wing people that are saying it. They've always said it. They've always been saying it. But we're seeing characters like Thomas Massey. If we're looking at podcasters, that was the Anchor Baby you were talking about. He doesn't touch guys like Fresh and Fit, guys like Nick Fuentes, guys, all these giant voices that are younger men.
Tucker Carlson, even, right?
Yeah, Tucker Carlson. That are younger men.
But I brought them up because of their age. They're quite young, and I'm surprised that they're considered right wing, but they're still, on board supporting Zionism, supporting Trump.
Only about half of them. So the right wing is now splitting. So we already took the left wing out of the Zionism conversation. The right wing has now split in half, where half the right wing are the most vocal anti-Zionists. And so this is where I have a complete agreement with Constantine that I don't think they even have maybe one generation left when this boomer generation falls off in power, when they're all doddering around in old folks' homes. The next generation isn't going to pick up that torch. They aren't going to be willing to sell everything down the river for Israel. And like I said, you can see it in giant names in the right wing, where the most heavy anti-Zionist action is actually coming out of the Republicans.
I hope you're right. I've seen media manufactured consent over and over again, and it makes me despair, I guess. Constantin,
but that's Zionist media. The Zionists already still own the media. They've owned the media for years. That's part of why they're having such problems right now, because the newer medias they don't own. This is part of why, like TikTok. The real reason that we had a problem with TikTok isn't because of stupid fucking little videos, because they do it on every other social media where they get little 15-second idiot videos. The real problem with TikTok was that TikTok was releasing information from Gaza and the whole world was watching it. It wasn't being censored through Zionist media. And so they're like, oh, TikTok's the evil. And who do they sell it to? The freaking the people that are absolute Zionists, because then now all those things that were censored, like if we think about it, 5 years ago, you couldn't say a nasty thing about Zionism or Israel without getting shut off on the internet. That is coming back because they realize that media is their only true weapon in this.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen the shift in these big personalities such as Alex Jones and Tucker Carlson, and they have really done a 180 in terms of their views on Israel. I've been listening to Alex Jones for like 15 years. He wasn't speaking like this the way he is. He's speaking about the role of Israel and how it's embedded in the deep state in the United States, and it's responsible for a lot of the foreign policy. That's new. So you're right. A lot of these younger voices, like Nick Fuentes, and he's always on Alex Jones' show, so they're obviously having an effect. Again, I think about what's going to happen 10, 15 years, and I despair when I see Marjorie Taylor Greene, Thomas Massey losing or leaving. It just gives me cause for concern, because when I think you've still got a lot of people and when it comes to podcasts, online media, like Ben Shapiro, who are still right behind, this Zionist thing. And you got anything you want to say, Constantine, before we wrap this up?
Yeah, just real quick, I would like to comment on what you said earlier. Like basically, people they just care about their own personal comfort. I don't think it's specifically unique to the United States. I think that's pretty much true everywhere, right? Like people really only care about themselves, which is perfectly natural. I mean, they want enough to eat. They want, I mean, bread and games, basically, right? They want the cheap gas. They want to go to the movies. They want to have a good time. They want to have a full fridge, and they don't want to worry about money, basically. And these wars are going to change this, especially the war in Iran right now, because of the Strait of Hormuz. It's closed. It will seriously disrupt the supply line, and people will suffer, average people, as a result already. I mean, Benjamin mentioned the price of gas in California went up threefold as a result of this conflict, and it will get worse, I think, because it's not going to end anytime soon, because there will be no deal, I think, next week or tomorrow, as they say. And so the people will care, and then they will probably, a lot of them will look at the reasons, like, why are we even there? Like, why are we doing this? Like, why do I have to pay $6 for gas when, like, I don't know, a couple of, like, 3-4 months ago, only paid $2 or $3? So they will look at the reasons, so they will care, because it directly affects them. Like if you occupy, like, I know, Afghanistan, for example, like the United States did for 20 years, it didn't really affect the average American, right? Like he knew that there were American troops like far away somewhere in the Middle East. He didn't really give a shit because he was not connected to it personally. But I think now, because of the Strait of Hormuz issue, everybody in the West, and it's not just the United States, I mean, Western Europe, even worse, will feel the effects of the war on a real deep personal level. And this will really change a lot of people's opinions, because I think a lot of people will look into the causes of this conflict much more than in previous conflicts, in my opinion.
You're right. Yeah, and I don't have any hope for the statements that came out of the White House about an alleged peace deal or reopening the straits, because we know that for the straits to be reopened, the position of the White House is that the Iranians have to give up their rich uranium and stuff like that, and that's insane. If you're Iran and you've been attacked, several times in the last 2 years, why would you give up your enriched uranium? If I was Iran, I'd be rushing to develop a nuclear weapon for my own security. I mean, it looks like you two agree with me on that one.
Well, I agree 100%. I've been saying the same for years, right? Like, only possession of nuclear weapons guarantees sovereignty. I mean, there's a reason why North Korea was never attacked, right? I mean, I'm sure they would have been attacked if they hadn't had a nuclear weapon. It's pretty obvious. And as you said, Iran would be stupid not to develop a nuclear weapon now. So everything the Americans wanted to prevent, or the Israelis wanted to prevent, is going to happen now. And everything is going to be 10 times worse, 100 times worse for the United States. Because now it seems to me like the main objective of the United States is to open the Strait of Hormuz, which was completely open before the war, by the way. Yes. So, and people can see
very
it.
much like what you were talking about with the Taliban earlier. We went there, fought the Taliban, we left. Who's in charge? Taliban.
Exactly. $1 trillion out the window. It's just really, I mean, and people can see it now. Like all the rhetoric of Trump and Hegseth and all these people, it's cartoonish. It's totally clownish, and people can see it because the mainstream media has lost its hold on people, and X is just full of like memes and videos mocking them, and rightly so, in my opinion.
Yeah, and we were talking about the effect, Constantin, that the wars, the opium wars had, on the world, and how the British seized Hong Kong, and stuff like that. And I know after 2001, after we invaded Afghanistan, the amount of heroin that was on the streets, it was an epidemic. The people who I cared most about in my world died because of heroin addiction. And, the Taliban, I think in the last year of the Taliban's control, the year 2000, I think the amount of heroin that was coming out of that country was something like 99 tons. And then in 2006 and 7, under US and UK occupation, it was 8,600 tons. It's insane. And again, so many people in my world died because of that shit. And I'm sure all of you, both of you experienced people that you know who also suffered because of that. Anyway, so listen, before you go, would you like to promote anything or tell the audience about your stuff? I mean, I know, Constantin, you've got Multipolar Press, and I recently got one of your books. It was to do with Lovecraft.
Sorry, which book did you?
I had to do you had a book that you were promoting on your X account, and it had to do with Lovecraft.
You mean is it Ultra Heavy, the science fiction novel?
Sorry.
No, you mean Lovecraft and Civilization? Yes.
Yes,
right.
yes.
It's basically a collection of essays that Lovecraft wrote, which are not in the mainstream editions of Lovecraft's works because they're not politically correct, right? Because like most of the Lovecraft stuff you can get like on Amazon on the regular bookshops, they're just the short stories. But
are you an occultist?
Sorry?
Are you an occultist?
No, I'm not an occultist. No, not really. I mean, I'm sort of interested in some certain theories of the occult, I suppose, but I'm not an occultist myself. It's more like political writings of Lovecraft that he wrote in like in the early 19-teens and 1920s, like during the period of World War I, like sort of like, I don't know, things that would be considered offensive today because it's racist or sexist, and nationalist, because I mean that's who he really was, and he was very outspoken about it. He had his own magazine, his own publication, and so the edition that I published is basically a selection of these essays, basically.
I got that. I bought it a couple of days ago. I was actually reading. Are either of you readers of Peter Lavender? I bought Peter Lavenda's Dunwich, which is sort of like Lovecraft meets the what's that? The Da Vinci Code. It's written like the Da Vinci Code, but the themes of it are very Lovecraftian. Anyway, knockout book, man, awesome. So this, when I saw your promotion on X, I was like, you know what? I'm reading Lovecraft. I'm reading Lavender. It's got those occult themes. I like those stories, so do you know what? I'll get myself a copy. So, so you would like to mention Multipolar Press or anything?
Yeah, well, I just published another book that I wrote called The Fate of White America, where it pretty much mentions several points we touched today during the interview, sort of like the ethnos of the white American, and where he came from and where he's going. And so, but it's ambivalent, right? I mean, so it's really, you can't really say he has an optimistic future or he has a pessimistic future, because the future is open. Because I think because of this paradigm shift that we're experiencing right now, there are a lot of possibilities that are open, which is sort of like the silver lining. Yes, because a lot of bad shit's going to happen, obviously. A lot of bad shit is happening already. But I think it also opens doors to positive outcomes that might realize if we put some effort into them. Yes.
Nice.
And right.
Balderson, you've got your channel on YouTube, but you also make a lot of, appearances on other channels, like,
Yeah, I get around. My show is Benjamin Balderson, is where you can find it, and I've got a few shows on there, like Uncle Ted Talks. I go on the Raging Tomato usually 2 or 3 times a week, and I get all over the place. Besides that, just type my name in. I don't have a book. Your book sounds brilliant. I've already looked that up. That sounds awesome. But I do make jewelry, and I make things from my farm, my homemade things. I grow all my own food and make all my own medicines from my own. I got 50 acres, so it's not like it's a city backyard. My gardening area and growing areas and animal husbandry areas are a lot bigger than most. So I put a lot of time into that, but yeah, this has been an
Do you
absolute
know? Do you
pleasure.
know how many animals you've got on that? On your land? I know you've got some alpacas and cats. and
Yeah.
stuff.
I think currently I only have 7 alpacas. I had 6 cows. I had to get rid of some of my cows though. I had a pig. Got rid of the goats. Goats are such a pain in the ass. I've got they tear up. They're just destructive, just horribly destructive. And I've probably got 100 or so different birds, peacocks, ducks, chickens, turkeys, you name it. Dogs, cats. Yeah.
Right. Anyway, guys, thank you for coming on, and I'll probably have a one-on-one with Garland, soon.
All right, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Right. Thanks. Right,
Always
good
a pleasure. Nice meeting you, Constantine.
Well, likewise.
Gold-pressed platinum, slip strips and bars. If you ever find some, you can lose it in quartz. Get a Ractogino, spin the double wheel. Order a black hole, just depends how you feel.